Hi there, everyone. So got another fantastic interview today. So I've invited along Laurie Webber from the Mindful Eating Clinic. And the reason for inviting her along today is coming from the point of view as a therapist, as a McTimoney chiropractor, that over the years, I've seen many patients that come in because they've got back pain, neck pain, joint pains. But fundamentally, the root cause to those problems or those aches and pains isn't because of the alignment, but the root cause has come more as a result of food and eating habits, which have then created inflammation in the body and then as a result pain. So often, because we do unfortunately worldwide have a massive diet culture, and often the first go-to thought is, if you want to lose weight, is a slimming club. And often the word diet, also the connotations to that are restriction and having to stick to something. And the pattern often is that you may lose weight and reach your weight goal, but then you stop the slimming club and then things revert back and then you end up back to where you are. And that's where somebody like Laurie comes in, because when you address your mindset and mindfulness, then not only will you reach your goals, but you're just going to feel so much happier in your mind and your spirit and your everyday life. So just the ripple effects to it are just astronomical, really. So thank you for coming along today, Laurie.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Rachel. What a great introduction. I don't think I could have put it better myself, actually.
So before we go into the maybe the types of people that you work with and how you work, can you just give us a little overview on who you are and how you've got to running the Mindful Eating Clinic?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Yes. So the Mindful Eating Clinic happened really by accident. I had about 40 years, 40, yes, years of disordered eating, which looked like yo-yo dieting, binging, and I now realise, retrospectively, with hindsight, that I actually had binge eating disorder. But at the time, I didn't think I had any eating disorder particularly. I just knew I was embroiled in very unhealthy eating practices, behaviours, which were causing me a lot of emotional and sometimes physical pain, because it's not good to consume large amounts of food. And I got to a point, some might say, well, why did it take you that long? But I got to a point where, having accepted that was how I just lived around food, and have held down reasonable jobs and brought up a family and all of that, and sort of decided when I got to my mid-50s and realised that it had been going on for this long, that I just had to do something about it. So that 40 number was quite a milestone. So I employed some of my business coaching techniques. I've been a business trainer and coach for 20 years. And I looked at my behaviour. I used some NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I looked at behaviour change, all of these things that I had used with people in the corporate world, because I hadn't applied to myself. That's the whole physician heal thyself scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, easily done as well.
yeah, exactly. And I read quite a few books. I learned all about intuitive eating. I learned about the physical harm that dieting does. I learned about the psychological harm that dieting does. I did quite a lot of work on body image. And the culmination of that was that I fixed myself in about 6 months.
Wow.
So that was 4.5 years ago. I haven't binged since. Still get the voices in my head a little bit, because 40 years is a long time to have that narrative going on. But I have learned techniques, and this is what I do with my clients, to understand the voices and to accept them and to do something different. So having done that, I decided that I couldn't just sit still and enjoy a nice happy life with food quietly. I actually wanted to try and help other people avoid 40 years, avoid 1 year, of behaving, of having this very difficult, anxious relationship with food, where you go out to dinner and you look down the menu and nothing fits with whatever diet plan you happen to be on at that moment. And I've done them all, every single one, repeatedly, to just get rid of that, right through to somebody who is binging and purging, which is a terrible, horrible, damaging thing to be living with. I mean, it's so painful. And so I retrained. I sort of formalized what I had done on myself, and I retrained and got some diplomas, and I'm just finishing a master practitioner with the National Centre for Eating Disorders, in order to have some credentials, apart from the fact that I, had done quite a lot in coaching anyway, and with myself. And so now that's where I am, trying to help as many people as possible to find this strapline of mine, which is find a happy life with food.
Yeah, marvelous. And one thing that just springs to mind from what you were just saying, was there a point, and is this the case with other people you work with as well, that things have been a certain way for so long that it just becomes the norm, that you actually don't feel like it could be any different anyway? Would that be correct? Yeah.
Yes. So firstly, somebody needs to be at least halfway to 2/3 to the point of wanting to change. And say I'm working with someone who really needs to lose weight for serious health reasons. So if I'm working with someone who's morbidly obese, and I use that term, which is a difficult term, and in some circles it's not accepted as a term, but it is the clinical term for somebody who is in a weight situation which is heavier than is required for their health. Okay, so that I'm using that word in that context. They sometimes need incentivizing to change, because they don't really want to. So I have that element. There is, as you say, absolutely someone who has been really entrenched in behaviors for a long time. They don't believe that they can change. They don't quite know who they are outside of that eating behavior. And this happens a lot in the overeating disorders. So I don't treat the undereating disorders, I treat overeating disorders.
Okay, yeah.
So that happens quite a lot, because if you've been doing that for, well, not even the length of time that I did, a couple of years, it starts to define you as an individual. And so because you're so tied up, and maybe you call yourself a binge eater or an emotional eater, like the same as a person with blonde hair.
Yes.
I am 5'4", I am a binge eater. So some of it is about changing the dialogue to help somebody detach themselves from the behavior, because you're right, it's something that they've lived with for such a long time that it becomes part of something that is woven into how they operate. And changing can be scary, because of the kind of life that they might have afterwards. Even though they desire it, they don't know it, they haven't had it for a long time, they're not quite sure what that is. But also this sense that it's going to be hard work, and sometimes it is. I had a text from someone I've been working with since before Christmas today, and it's heartbreaking. She's had a relapse, and she says, I'm a lost cause, I'm going to go back to Slimming World. But it's the years of Slimming World and other factors that have got her to where she is at the moment. And it's kind of, so a lot of it is about trying to persuade people and be there for people, to encourage them to see the positive. So when I'm trying to get them away from this pain, and it was really interesting, when we had this discussion about having this conversation, and you were talking about pain is so broad, isn't it? Pain is, yes, of course, physical.
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah.
But it is also emotional, in the sense that people can feel terribly isolated and distressed about it, and so she wants to fix it, and she's finding it quite difficult for whatever reason, and there are a number of reasons why it is a longer journey for people. And so a lot of my role is to say, it's fine. A relapse is actually sometimes a positive point of pain, because what we can try and do is to turn it round and say, what was happening? Let's try and understand it. where was the trigger? How did you feel at the time? What were you thinking at the time? What might you have said to yourself differently? How might you have felt if you'd done something different? And all of these, and we sort of unpick it, so it becomes less of a uncontrollable monster and more something that is, oh, I've lost my keys. Oh, fiddle, that is such a pain. What can I do differently to not lose my keys? Put them back in the same place every time. Now, I'm not trivializing the eating behavior, the disordered eating disorder, but it is a little bit like that, but breaking it down into bite-sized chunks so that gradually you sort of start banging away at this great big rock, and you start off with a tiny, like a toothbrush, and you hardly seem to be making any inroads in it at all, and then you start to chip it away, and then you feel like your hammer's getting bigger, and then you can just, in the end, you can just whack it, and it's only that big.
Very much.
But it takes time.
And also that when those relapses happen, then be kind to yourself. But it's also great that you notice that the relapse has happened. You're becoming much more aware, and like you say, then when you then look at it and find out what the triggers are, you're more empowered then next time those things happen, aren't you? And I completely understand you weren't trivializing with the keys thing, but then for somebody that hasn't still learned to put the keys in the same place so that I can find them, that also when things are a lot more trivial, it can still happen too, but you notice it and self-correct.
Exactly. And you might lose your keys 6 times in a row, and then the 7th time you say, right, I'm fed up with this now.
That's it.
I'm hanging my keys on a hook.
Yes.
And you might
got a lot better.
But it might take 6. It might take 6 goes. And picking up on that point that you made just then about being kind to yourself and about being compassionate, one thing that I'd like people listening who maybe have a tricky relationship with food, where it is dominating some of their life, that they might be counting points every day, counting sins, counting calories, and feeling like they cannot manage their weight without that. And that they perhaps yo-yo between a restrictive diet and then they put it back on, is that in any context where you've got that kind of behavior right through to a fully blown eating disorder, is that there is a lot of guilt and shame attached to it. And when things are not perfect, a lot of perfectionism creeps in this kind of behavior. When things are not perfect, we are very unkind to ourselves. But the thing to understand, particularly about restrictive dieting, is that your body is fundamentally designed to keep you alive.
That's it.
So if you start giving it less than it needs, particularly in a dramatic way, so there are things like these liquid diets where you might be on 800 calories a day, you will lose weight. Well, of course you will start off losing weight, because you're probably eating less than half what your body needs, at least less than half. But the problem is that because the body just wants to keep you alive, if you put it into what it sees as a starvation mode, it will rebel. And it will start to slow things down. It will start to slow down your metabolism, and it will start to hang on to whatever it has available for energy to keep you alive,
Yes, that's it.
And so that's why people plateau. So there's that side of it, and also we have our own physical, natural ways of controlling appetite. So we have 2 hormones, 2 chemicals that do that for us. One is called ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone that says go and eat, and the other one is leptin, which is our fullness hormone. And if we are on diets, if we're following a diet plan and we're adhering to something that somebody else says we should be doing, they don't know our body for a start, so it's nuts really. We are actually eating with our heads, so we're overriding those natural signals that we have, and that's what intuitive and mindful eating is all about. Learning to trust the fact that you actually don't need a diet book to tell you what to do. you can actually create a nutritional sound platform that's going to support a change of thinking around eating behaviors, and also learn to trust yourself. Because I mean, this is again kind of trivializing it a bit, but I always imagine it's as if the brain is going, well, I'm not even going to bother to listen to this ghrelin and this leptin bloke, because you're not going to do anything about it anyway.
That's it. Yeah, what's the point? Yeah.
There's this sort of, you know, battle going on. I mean, you've still got the chemicals, but you're just overriding all the time. You know, and so there's a huge amount of letting go and trusting. That's where someone like me comes in, because it's quite a big change for people to do, and they need to be supported, you know, through it. But it is possible, absolutely possible.
And because something that just springs to mind for me there is that, you know, when you're eating more mindfully, then you're connecting mind and body more, rather than that, as you say, that kind of the mental overriding everything. Because like you say, we are all individual. The foods that make us feel better or make us feel tired and sluggish, or make you even, you eat something and it makes you crave even more of the very thing that, you know, that's not great for you, that through that mindful eating approach that you are observing more. Would that be,
yes,
is that the case? Or
yes, and in the context of my clinic, it's about the physical operation of eating more mindfully, which is about eating more slowly, and being aware of the flavors and savoring it and feeling satisfied. In other words, answering a need. I say a lot, so anyone who's listened to me on my podcast will know that I say, if you want macaroni cheese, no amount of lettuce is going to cut it.
No, it's true. Yeah.
It's just, so you're better off having a portion of macaroni cheese that you want, that your appetite requires at that particular moment. You eat it mindfully, which means slowly, and you stop when you're full. And stopping when you're full is a big thing that I have to help people retrain in.
Yeah, because they're obviously eating more slowly, then you're allowing good old leptin to have the voice and have the say. But because this is something that's come up in a few sessions with people that I've worked with recently, in that feeling full, because there's physically being full, but then there's that emotionally feeling filled up,
feeling satisfied.
Yes. Yeah. So does that come more naturally when you are eating mindfully, or are there other things that you need to do to help that?
Yes, it does come more naturally, because I encourage people to connect with what they're eating. In fact, I say to them, imagine you're on MasterChef and you're in the food critic room and you get presented with this plate. How are you going to describe it? When you eat it, how are you going to describe it? So it's not just a question of fueling, because if I don't, I'm going to fall over, or grabbing something because I'm on the way to take the kids swimming, or whatever it might be. Wherever possible, you know, and I'm pragmatic about this, it's not always going to be possible, but wherever possible, that it's much more of a meal, and it's something that's prioritized in your diary, in your calendar for that day, as much as a meeting that you have. So there's that actual, you know, physical mindful eating operation, if you like, but there's also the sense of being more mindful in terms of awareness of nutrition, awareness of what's good for your health. And as you'll say, for some people, they have intolerances and they have allergies, and I'm not a nutritionist. I have a nutritional therapist on my team, and so we can refer somebody to her, you know, if there's a particular issue. And just to be aware, but not in an obsessive way like we might be when we're dieting, when it's all or nothing, and to aim to just do the best you can.
Yes, yeah.
For your health, and that if you are eating according to hunger and fullness, and you're eating a nutritionally sound diet, which means that one of the most important things about the whole cognitive retraining in terms of eating behavior is to balance your glucose. So I do look at, somebody's food diary and I look at the pattern, and the sugar cycle is such that if you eat a lot of simple carbohydrates, which might be chocolate or white bread or white rice or crisps, or things that are digested very quickly, you get a hit, you get an energy, a dopamine hit, which is lovely, but you crash much faster afterwards, and then your body and your brain is going, oh, I need something else. And because your behavior pattern is to reach for crisps or to reach for something like that, a biscuit, you will go back to that much more quickly. So it's about creating an awareness of what I'm eating and how that's making me feel and how that's making me drive other eating patterns, and stopping and saying, this is interesting, not beating myself up about it. This is really interesting, because if I think about what I had for lunch, I'm now thinking I'm really hungry 2 hours later.
Yeah.
And it could be because of what you had at lunchtime. It might be because you had to grab something. Life is like that, of course.
It happens. Yeah.
We can't always plan to have our lovely, fantastic snack in our bag. We do our best, but we can't always. But that mindful awareness says, okay, I think I need to eat some more biscuits because I had half a dozen biscuits at lunchtime. I don't actually. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 10 minutes. I'm going to go outside if I'm working out, or I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to grab a handful of nuts and a piece of fruit instead.
Yes.
Almost like, so, it's just building that sense of connection with how we're eating, what we're eating, the impact that's having on what we think and what we feel.
Yeah, very much. And that's a huge thing, like say, how hungry you feel after a particular food, because, and again, it comes back to that individuality thing, that for myself and my wife Lorna, we can both eat oat porridge and it fills me up completely till lunchtime. She's ready for a second breakfast an hour and a half later, but she has a millet porridge and that completely keeps her filled up, just to use two examples of the similar thing. And so it is, it's that, it's not that you need more, it's okay, is it that what I ate has led to that feeling sooner or not?
Yes.
In the food choices. Yeah,
exactly. And actually, if you are hungry, and part of what I will work on with people is getting them to understand whether it is genuine hunger or whether there's something else that's
going on,
like because the clock says 1 o'clock, for example.
Yeah.
If you're hungry, you must eat. You absolutely must eat. Because sometimes when I pick up with people, they will say, oh, well, I was really good today. For a start, I try and get rid of that sort of language. I was really good today. I didn't have lunch. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that then.
Yeah.
Because the whole dieting thing, if that's in their head, is around the less you eat, the more weight you lose. If you've been on something restrictive. And I will say that the slimming clubs, in a way, there is positive and negative with them. What they can do is they can educate people around the basics of nutrition in terms of where the most points lie. So if somebody doesn't really understand the calorie dense foods and the impact of some of those perhaps on weight, then that can be quite helpful. But conversely, they don't always differentiate, say, between healthy fats and less healthy fats. So for example, an avocado is quite a high fat food, but it's full of essential fatty acids.
Yeah, they're essential because your body can't make them, so you really need to eat them.
Can't make them, and you cannot think properly if you
that's
don't
it.
have EFAs in your body. So and one of the slimming clubs actually counts that as a very high point food. Smoked mackerel is the same. It's oily fish. It's full of fat, but it's good fat. So they fall down a bit there, and I think they also fall down because they are very numerical target focused. You might turn up and you get weighed, and if you've lost a pound, everybody claps. If you haven't lost a weight, so it's sort of I think they can associate weight loss or weight gain with shame, embarrassment in that sort of public arena, which I absolutely think is very damaging.
Yeah,
And sorry, just the other one thing to say about that is that you can tell once I start, it's very hard to shut me up. I'm just going to make this one point.
No, it's great.
And that is that there's been a lot of research done, particularly in America, with the National Weight Registry, around the fact that the most successful long-term consistent weight management scenario is with people who do not have a numerical goal in mind, but that the goals are behavioural.
Yes, yeah.
And of course that goes against a lot of the advertising that you see. Lose a stone in a week, lose half a stone, you know, and because as you alluded to at the beginning, the problem with that mentality is that we can maybe get to target weight through a lot of willpower and actually quite a lot of discomfort and a lot of it feeling quite miserable and fed up half the time. But then what do you do at the end of it, because you haven't addressed the behaviours that have led to either the disordered eating or the weight gain in the first place? And sorry, one other tiny point. When I talked about the metabolism slowing down, it's a double whammy, okay? Because you finish the end of the diet, you haven't addressed the behaviours that got you there in the first place. That's bad enough, more difficult enough for you, and therefore it's not your fault. Big one, it is not your fault, it's the fault of dieting, what it does to your body. But the other thing is that because your metabolism has slowed down, if you go back to eating the way you ate before, your body's not going to burn it as fast either.
That's it, you put more weight on. Yeah. Hugely.
And
no, that's okay. Check my consumption of EFAs now in my memory to recall all the information. No, the thing going back to the with the slimming clubs where, like you say, like an avocado had more points, and I'm actually not even sure if the supermarkets still do it, because I'm not a supermarket shopper, but they used to have the red, amber, green. I'm not sure if they still do, with calories, and that's the thing that used to really frustrate me when you see some salmon and then it's got red high fat content, and you just like say, it's no, that's the EFAs, they're really essential for your health, your body can't make them. But also I remember some studies where actually by eating the essential fatty acids, weight loss was the result, because your body's got the tools, like you say, you're not into that stress mode, your body's got what it needs and is able to work effectively with it as well. And then the other thing was about the restriction side, is that I remember being on a course once where somebody said, oh yeah, they just had a banana for lunch because it meant they could have a glass of wine for dinner. And coming from, as a therapist, as a eating for health point of view, thinking, oh my, okay. And I've got a friend that openly admits that several years ago she was doing a slimming club and she really liked Nutella. So rather than so Nutella was a point and the toast to have it on was a point. So and then one of the days she realized, she's not really that keen on bread anyway, that she could have 2 spoonfuls of Nutella as her breakfast and have the same amount of points. And it's 100% not your fault, because that nowhere is the education and the understanding of eating for health, where as a result you reach the goals that you're looking for. And like I say, calorie restriction and denial and suffering and everything that goes with the word diet.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
And there's a massive business built around it. And like I say, people like yourself can help with the psychology. Because there's a lot of things, I mean, it's so much out there and advertised diet and this is what it means, but also the triggers or the reasons why we can have disordered eating. So there's the first one that springs to mind for me is in childhood you can't leave the table till you finished your plate, so then that becomes an ingrained thing. But are there other common triggers that you come across as to what can underlie how you eat in your relationship with food?
Yes, absolutely. That one's childhood food story, as I call it, does have a huge impact. Doesn't mean we can't turn it around at all, because that's how you were brought up. That's when you were a child, but you're not a child anymore. So let's look at the voices, look at the replay that's happening in your head, and then we can change that. And of course, as somebody adjusts their appetite, then their food portions come down anyway, and then they're less likely to waste food.
Yeah.
You know, other triggers. Well, I think it's a common thinking that there must be trauma. Sometimes there is trauma associated with eating disorders. Sometimes it's something that someone has started doing in order to have some control over their life because there has been an event or a relationship that's been difficult. So, or maybe school was difficult. You know, I have a couple of clients who had experienced quite a lot of bullying. So there can be incidents that happen, events that happen to people. Some of the situations that I see are where, as young women, it's mostly women, not exclusively women, and I'd love to work more with men, but it's harder for men. It's so much harder for men to come forward. But quite a few of the women will have been conscious at school, perhaps, or in younger life, that they didn't look how they thought they should. So they go on a diet, and that starts the whole roller coaster. Sometimes you only need to go on one diet for them to be up and down for the rest of your life, and it gets sort of progressively more difficult because of the situations that we've talked about before. The interesting thing about some of the disorders is that actually the binging we might think drives the restriction, for example. So we think that the binging is the starting point, and because we binge and we don't want to put weight on, or we want to actually punish ourselves for this, quote, disgusting behavior that we've just carried out, that actually it's that way around. But it's far more likely that it's the dieting scenario, it's the restriction which is causing the binging, and that's an emotional and a physical driver. It's a physical driver because you are depriving your body of what it needs, and in the end it'll just, you know, it's just far too strong, and psychologically you're in such a miserable place that it's just totally unsustainable. And so what happens is that sometimes people will start off just as dieters and they turn into binge eaters.
Okay.
Because of the impact of the restriction. It's difficult to generalize because although there are a number of disordered eating patterns that we talk about generally, there are also a lot of variations on that. There are a lot of atypical eating disorders that I came across when I was studying, so for example, there's something called atypical anorexia, where we all know anorexia as a condition where people basically don't eat enough food. That's simplifying it, but that's what we might see. That's how it manifests itself. But there is a variation of that where actually there is binging and purging. So binging particularly in order that somebody can then starve. Okay.
Yeah.
So the driver is the starving, but the behavior is not anorexia. The behavior is the living. It's living. So it, you know, it's very, very complicated, and that's why every person that comes to me or to anyone like me may have a number of different symptoms, and it's sort of our job to try and work out the best approach. And although I have a number of tools in my kit bag, like you in your work, you know, we will apply whichever we think is the right at that particular time. But you know, mostly it will start off with some kind of exploration of this food story, of this lifeline, to see the role that food has played. and also a food diary to see exactly what someone's doing. And if someone is quite a serial dieter, I have to say, right, this is not a diet. You're not reporting into me. I don't want to see a perfect day. I just want you to just try and have a week of eating when you want to, doing what you want, purging if you purge, binge if you just write it all down. You know, you and I are in it together. There is no judgment. And I think sometimes because of what I went through myself, that seems to convince people that there's actually very little that they could write down or say that I hadn't really experienced or thought about myself, you know, which is quite a helpful thing, I think, for them, rather than perhaps having someone who hasn't lived it and doesn't understand perhaps firsthand, you know, the shame and the guilt and just the physicality of some of those behaviors, you know. So there are a number of triggers that I come across.
And then I would think that if somebody came to work with you, like you say, that they can just openly say what's happened during the week, that there has been binging and purging, just to be able to express that must be huge, rather than how.
Yes.
Imagine otherwise you just keep it all to yourself, and like I say, you feel the guilt and the shame.
Yes.
Yeah, the sharing must be massive.
Yes. And I know from my experience it was huge, because nobody knew, not even my closest friends knew.
Yeah.
And I would say 70% of people who come to me have never told another living soul.
Yeah.
And that gets quite emotional.
Oh, that's huge. Massive. Yeah.
And just that makes it feel less shameful, actually. And if we talk about the yo-yo dieting, which, you know, I also work a lot, so it's not just about eating disorders, the yo-yo dieting, you know, they will say, I have to get this sorted because my husband's just fed up with me starting a new diet on a Monday. He will say, right, what can't I eat this week then? You know, because if they happen to be in control of the cooking, say, you know, I mean, and again, that's applying some humor to it, but just people are just fed up being on. I mean, it's absolutely exhausting.
So you're just chained to it, aren't you?
Whilst
that's happening, yeah.
You know, and the shelves are filling up with diet books, and the more diets you go on that don't work, the more of a failure you feel.
Yes, it, yeah.
You know, and so yes, you're right. That feeling that they're working hand in hand with somebody is hugely helpful. And if somebody signs up as a client of mine, we don't just have that communication when we have the sessions across Zoom or on the phone. Not everybody wants to show me their face, that's fine. They can also text and WhatsApp me anytime, because the chances are they're going to have a wobble, not when they've got their session booked, but, you know, 11:30 on a Friday night when there's a box of chocolates talking to them, for example.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just there all of the time, because you need to feel like you're not alone in this, and that something else other than what we think is available is possible. And that's why the whole intuitive eating movement is just really good. And I work with some of their principles, not all of them, but some of them that are helpful within the mindful eating context that I've created. But it just gives people hope that there is another way to manage their eating behavior and their weight, which isn't about, you know, dieting, meal clubs and restriction and feeling uncomfortable. Because when that initial enthusiasm, new diet, great, here's my notebook, right, tomorrow I'm going to eat a boiled egg, or you know, that's extreme, but even if you're still monitoring calories up to 1500, say, which is not enough for most people, that you're still governed by something that is up here in your head, whereas maybe on that day your body, maybe you've exercised a bit more the day before, maybe your body needs 2200 that day, and then the following day it needs 2000, or you know, it's not just about ridiculously restrictive diet. It's also about, you know, enforcing this counting control on something which can be intuitive and much more relaxed, rather than sitting on MyFitnessPal at 10 o'clock and sort of think, oh, okay, so I've gone 50 calories over. Well, if I walk up down the stairs 5 times, I'll be okay.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, yeah.
You know, and this happens because we've devolved all the power and the control to something else.
I was going to say it's all outside of us, isn't it, rather than within us? Yeah, very much. And so just to summarize then, so if you're working with somebody, the things that I've heard are that it's not going to be some huge dietary change that you have to stick to, and this is the plan and this is the program. It's like a more of a gentle way of being more reflective, like you say, slowing down, being more mindful of what you're eating, how it tastes, how your body responds to it. And then underpinning that, then there's the emotional help and support, and helping people to move beyond and for things to be different and better.
Yes. Yes.
Is there anything I'm missing in that summary, or
well,
how you work together? Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a look at creating a more nutritionally sound platform, but that's not obsessive.
Yeah.
So I have a list of preferences. It's not a plan, it's a preference. If you can manage it, great, and you will feel better if you can. So again, I'm giving the choice and the empowerment to the other person. I think the other big thing is to change the psychological pathways. So to change the thinking that drives the behavior. Because it all starts from a combination of getting your blood glucose, you know, your diet more stable, which isn't about being, you know, super healthy all the time, but about generally making it more stable in association with understanding the existing thinking, the attitudes towards food and towards yourself and your body image, trying to work through those in a big holistic ball of yarn,
yeah,
or a bowl of spaghetti, if you want to think about food, that's fine, you know, and just sort of it all sort of mixes together. It's a very organic process, and as with any kind of therapy coaching, you know, you sort of go with the client and where they are at that particular moment and help them with the challenges that come into their head and try and, you know, weave it. But I think that the cognitive rebuilding or changing the cognitive pathways is absolutely crucial, so that the new behaviors get bigger and bigger and bigger and more embedded, and the old behaviors, you know, that subconscious voice, which is just trying to look after us, you know, its intentions are good.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
But that's just because that's what it's learned. But that's not what we want to do anymore.
Yeah. And it can be different, can't it? So yeah, like I say, training things to how you want. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, marvelous. And then so when you have a first session, just describe what a first session would look like, just so people can have an idea what your approach would be like.
Yes, yeah, sure. So anyone who comes to me has a free half an hour on the phone with me anyway, or over Zoom, so they can have a feel for whether I'm the right person. And also I make sure that what they need help with, I can deliver on. And if not, I've got quite a good network, so I refer them on to other people. So we do that. And then the first session, we'll look at a lifeline very often. So if it's an eating disorder, we'll look at a lifeline and probably map that out in quite a detailed way to see where the behavior started, what was happening at the time and all of that. If it's more of a yo-yo dieting scenario, perhaps without any eating disorder present, then we'll also look at the role that food played and look at the dieting history. But with everybody, we look forward and we say, okay, where do you want to be? What would your ideal version of you look like around food? What are you thinking? What are you doing? I mean, we might incorporate some of what might you look like. I mean, you know, I have to be a little bit careful on that because I don't want it to be number based, but there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of aesthetic pride. There's nothing wrong with that, but we have to make sure that we balance that and that it's realistic. So if somebody comes to me and says, well, I want to weigh what I weighed at 18, and they're the same age as me, and they've had 3 children. I go, okay, well, let's have a conversation about what that means, how you're going to live.
Yes.
You know, so it's all about forward motivation, aspiring to live a different way around food. So the targets are very different. And with that in mind, we look at what that looks and feels like. We make a list of what the obstacles might be. And then we also build into that, what's your why motivation? What's your big picture incentive? You know, it might be so I can run around with my grandchildren. It might be so I can just feel free and easy. I can go out with friends and eat, you know, and so it doesn't really matter what it is. And then we use that as almost like a bit of a template. So over a course of sessions, might be 6, 10, might be longer, we will then look, and every now and again we'll say, let's go back to what we said in the first session. And it's so great when people go, oh, well, I'm already doing that. Oh, I'm doing that. Oh, I haven't got that obstacle. Oh, that one's still a little bit tricky. And they go, okay, so let's have a conversation about that one, you know, and it just provides them with this running positive incentive, but it's always towards motivation. What are we aspiring to? Where are we going to get to? Where do you want to get to? And how can I help you do that? Rather than running away from old behaviors, which of course the minute you think about old behaviors, they're back in your head again.
That's it. And there's negative emotions that go with them, isn't there? So yeah, and everything that you're describing is just hugely empowering. Like you say, when your why is big enough, it really does help you to stay on track. But like you say, in combination with that reviewing, because you forget, okay, oh my, yeah, actually, I am doing that now.
Yes.
And yeah, that really does help to give that momentum, doesn't it? To keep forward, you're doing the right thing.
And also, if somebody has a relapse, which is inevitable with a lot of people, you can say, okay, you've done this, but if you remember when we first started, you were doing this, 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 and this. How often have you done that? Well, I haven't. Well, I haven't, no. So just to get some perspective and to stop people catastrophizing over things that really are not as bad as they think they are.
Yeah, very much. And like you say, it's the switch in the mindset to see the positives. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure that's going to be really helpful for people, really empowering, and just to know that there are options out there. And so there is help out there as well. So I'll make sure that all your details are alongside this interview as well, so that if somebody would like to find out more, then they can get in touch. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, to just have the chance to talk to people. And yes, if I can reach one person, either directly or they go to someone else to get really the support that they need to find a happier life with food, then it's been well worth it. Thank you.
Yeah, hugely. And you know, you're not alone. There's help and support out there, and people like yourself that understand from having been in that place too. Then yeah, means a lot, I'm sure. So thank you.
Thank you.